Everybody. Welcome, welcome. Give it a few more minutes for more people to trickle in, but I'm going to go ahead and kick us off here. Welcome to our Building Your Tech Stack workshop with Dell for Startups. Please go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat. Maybe if this stays a small group, we can also introduce ourselves live, but for now, it's always great to see who's here, where you're calling in from. My name is Jenna Winokur. I'm an analyst with Graham & Walker, and I'm recently moved out to Seattle, so about to experience my first Seattle winter. Wish me luck.
Good luck.
If this is your first time joining us, Graham & Walker is a venture firm that activates the potential of women in business through programs, community, and direct investment. We are on a mission to reshape the public markets by investing in technology companies led by women and non-binary founders. Part of that programming includes sessions like today, where we bring in amazing people like Matt Boyett. Matt Boyett is an inside product specialist for Dell OEM Solutions. He uses his knowledge of Dell's broad enterprise portfolio to act as a technical resource in order to help businesses develop cutting-edge hardware solutions. His goal in this role is to help businesses design solutions that fit their go-to-market strategy, technical requirements, and end-user needs. Over this last year, he's also been specializing in the alternative cooling and generative AI space. Before I pass it over to him, I would love if we can get a quick group photo for this session. It's going to be pretty interactive, and so if you're able to turn on your cameras, please do so. And then we will be able to dive into the session. All right. Awesome. So great to see you all. Let's take our photo here in 3, 2, 1. Awesome. Okay, Matt, it is all you, and I'm going to make you a co-host here.
Perfect. Let me go ahead and get in my presentation mode. Also, hi, everyone. Good to meet you guys. Thank you so much for showing up. I really, really appreciate it. And hopefully we can get a lot of value out of this. That's definitely what I'm trying to go for, at least. So let me go ahead and start sharing my screen. So to make it fun, I had some goofy transitions in here. Not really.
Hold on, Matt. I can see your
oh yeah,
inside or the.
Thank you. They call me an inside product specialist, and this is not a product. So I am not going to do so great with this. Hold on, let me actually. Oh, let me make sure that I'm sharing the right screen. Yeah, hold
on. Okay.
I have a by the way, for everyone in the call, there's a 2-screen setup. Never really fun for presenting because you might get the other one. So let me actually.
Here's the hardware.
All right. So how is it looking now? Is it still okay? Perfect. All right. So hi everyone. Like Jenna said, I'm Matt Boyett, and I have the pleasure of getting to work for Dell Technologies OEM Solutions. It's kind of an offshoot of Dell, and I'll explain that in a second. Yeah. So when I said the transitions, just to go ahead and address that, I was messing around with stuff, and I was like, oh, I've never done this before. I remember doing this in like 6th grade whenever I was making my first slideshow. This is kind of fun, and I forgot to change it. So I don't know how many origami pigeons we're gonna get, but I think that's gonna add some flair. No, but in all seriousness, just want to give us the agenda really quick. So I'm gonna do a quick about me slide, and then I want to give a poll out because I do want to keep this enough of an interactive discussion, especially since we have a small forum. I really want to take advantage of that and just poll where your guys' expertise is, and then just really find a way to hone into the solutions that you would really need for your startups. And then from there, and this is and again, the agenda. The good news is it can be TBD. It's really depending on what your need is. But what I had set up was, what is a tech stack first? Just kind of go over that from a software development standpoint. And then, what you're thinking of, what you want to really look at when you're choosing your tech stack, and then how you'd want to deploy that, whether that be cloud or on-premise. And then just a little snapshot of our hardware solutions that can supplement that deployment. So, and then also a Q&A. So from there, just I can't wait to see when this cuts off, but I'm happy to have it. Okay, so like I said, Matt Boyett, I work for Dell OEM Solutions. So just to give a really quick overview, Dell's think we've heard of it. It's it's a pretty big company, but I actually work for what's actually referred to as the startup within Dell, weirdly enough. So I think that's actually how Esther and I ended up getting connected because she works for Dell for startups, and this is more of a different branch where we actually try to go to customers and different businesses from startup to tier three and try to give them any kind of level of technical consulting to put their solution onto and sell to other businesses. So we specifically deal with companies who have a software solution or an IP that they need to put onto hardware, but they don't want to become hardware manufacturers because who wants to do that? That's not fun. So we have a very, very, very wide portfolio of almost too wide of products at Dell. And in OEM Solutions, we try to find a way to choose the right product for the right solution. And then in my role, I have to have a very large understanding of our portfolio, from the top to bottom for every other product. So that's at least where my headspace is. And I still have that big software component on here, but that's really where my expertise lies. But I feel comfortable, covering the topics we have today. And then now, really quick, I did want to do a poll on prior technical experience, like I said, to just sort of gauge out and feel the room out. So, Jen, if you could go ahead and get that up if you haven't already. Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much. And then, yeah, I just honestly on here, just please just be as honest as possible. I had your proficiency with both software and hardware. And, if you're very proficient in software, then jump to the hardware side, or at least the tail end of this. So let me give that another second. I think we have everything filled out. All right, yeah, perfect. Thank you, guys. So then I actually see right here that we have very proficient with software and a bit with enterprise hardware. So that's actually that's actually really good news for me to go ahead and just know how to pivot this. So I do actually want to ask you guys, is there any part of software development tech stack that you want to go over based on your software expertise? And then please feel free to speak up, and if
Front
not,
end, yeah, yeah. I would
okay.
really like to understand the front end side of things, like once we like go for the Figma designs, and after that, probably yeah, the texture after the designs, wireframing.
Okay. Yeah, and you're talking about more from a front end interface design, kind of going from there to the back end and where to build from there. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I do have the back end, very strong people on the back end side, but right
Hmm.
now I'm trying to work on the front end side and trying to hire a front end developer, but currently working on the tech stack, like which would be better for like the SaaS solution like we have, and yeah, accordingly hire the right person.
Okay. Yeah. And actually, just to kind of keep this interactive, because I really love that context. What about for Mildred and I think Gozi, is that how I pronounce your name? I do want to see, I want to hear what
Yeah.
what your startups are about and what you guys are doing.
Hi, this is Ngozi. So, I am a non-technical solo founder. So I will be like speaking with developers to help, build out my MVP. So basically, like I'd be, I'm trying to gain insight. So when I speak to them about their tech stack, I'm more informed. I'm not going to build it, but I feel I need to kind of understand, have a sense of what they're doing and like what's in their tech stack.
Yeah, perfect. Wow.
Oh, and
And
I'm
then
building a ed tech platform.
gotcha. And then and what kind of platform is that? What's the kind of the mission statement of your product?
Oh, okay. So I'm building it's a professional development platform, but I say it falls under ed tech, and it's actually for young professionals on the African continent, and it provides them with like upskilling, but also like kind of like social capital and like infrastructure to kind of give them the confidence to build at home. Many young Africans want to migrate in order for their economic prospects, but
Yeah.
creating a platform that kind of gives them the tools and everything so they feel confident about remaining in their countries and building there.
Oh, that's amazing. Wow. So it's really like it's kind of enabling people without a traditional setup to still kind of develop any kind of product that they're trying to create, really, and without having to migrate. Is that correct?
Yeah. So not just products, but it could be just like they work for somebody else and they're trying to like further themselves along. Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. For development as well. That is super cool. I'm a I think it should be apparent, but I'm a big fan of startups, and even though that's not where my professional life takes me, that's why I love doing this stuff. I love hearing about what people are doing and how they're trying to actually do something different than other big companies, and how they're trying to just give something different and change the world. So I love that perspective. And then Mildred, do you have any context on what you're working on?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm actually John, the CTO. Mildred was not
Oh,
able to come join the call. So, we're from Milapoli.com, and what we provide is a kind of like an Apple store for SaaS businesses,
mhm.
apps. So it's like an Apple store and a Google's Play Store. So everything that you need in your company that you need to run your operations with, we have that. So from CRM to inventory system. So it's a kind of like an all-in-one SaaS store.
Oh, nice. Okay, yeah. So any kind of add-ons for any SaaS company or SaaS offering, that's how they could plug in, almost like a library in a way, right?
It's a library for businesses. So let's say, for
Okay.
example, you have a I don't know, like a garage store or even a hospital. We have HMIS system that gets plugged into the system and use the system outright.
Oh, wow. Well,
And
that's really cool. And I'm assuming from that standpoint, software proficiency is pretty high from y'all's
yeah,
standpoint.
yeah. So the other thing that we've done, the reason why we also joined or Milapoli joined the call, uh, because of the fact that you guys are in the Dell, and I used to work for big banks in New York City,
Mhm.
and whenever a company would ask me, what would you want to use my servers with, I always tell them about Dell. So right now with our startup, what we wanted to do is that whenever we would be uh, approaching companies, if they needed some hardware, we wanted to push Dell as well because of the ongoing support of Dell on site.
Oh, wow.
So
Well,
that's why maybe we could hook up later and kind of uh, talk about how we could expand on that one for our customers as
absolutely.
well. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's actually that's great news because I'm only going to have a Dell perspective from an enterprise standpoint, but that's a lot of what I have at the back end of this, and it's
Yes,
and
yes.
it's even something that I want to compress and send out to everybody on the call just to help them whenever they get there on their journey to look at enterprise hardware. And you guys are, I mean, a lot closer than a lot of startups to that space. I mean, and that's super exciting to be there, yeah, on that journey, and to be so close and already have those interactions. So yeah, and I would still love to connect it for this too because it's what I like to do. Not just my job, it's my passion. So I would love to
Excellent. Yeah.
connect and talk through that. So yeah, thanks everyone for giving that context and answering. And then from there, so I think I'm still going to go at least bird's eye, and run through some software. And please, by the way, any questions you have, I'm going to do my best to answer them as I'm going through this. So I just, throw them at me and I'll field it however I can. So yeah, with that, let me see. Looks like the transitions are gone. What a shame. So I just had this first slide, just targeting any kind of people that are new to the world of software development and what to really look at. And this is, just and we. It's funny because this isn't even a Dell slide, but we love icebergs. I don't know if you. There's a lot of internal material. It's probably more of an inside joke. I don't know if Esther's seen a lot of it, but we love a good top and bottom. But I think it's a very good breakdown of what front end and back end really are. So from a front end perspective, you're really trying to just develop that look, that UI, that feel of whatever your software, your product is. And you would typically use something like JavaScript, React.js. But React is very, very prominent in this space for front-end development. And most software stacks and like they really focus on using React a lot. So this list, this isn't an all-inclusive list of what goes on the front end and the back end, but still, it really highlights the key players. And then for the back end, that is that's a little beefier. So front end really, you think looks, you think feel, and then back end layer is really responsible for the server side logistics or for logic and how the applications really work. And that includes Java, Python, Ruby, usually any of those programming languages for developing that server-side connection. And in the back end, sort of under that umbrella, you have a database layer where you'd use MySQL, Postgres, Postgres SQL. I always butcher the pronunciation of that one. And then MongoDB too. So really just these flagship database softwares that you would use to store anything and all your data, because data's got to go somewhere, of course. And infrastructure and server / load balancing tools as well underneath that backend umbrella. So that's really where the physical or virtual servers run the application. And that's the big distinction that I'm going to make later in this presentation, where you have your on-premise and you have your cloud deployments. And that's really where that's where you have your product developed and you're ready to just take it to market, and you just want to find your deployment model that's going to work the best and be honestly the most affordable and efficient. So from there, I mean, here's more of a suite. There's the world of options that it really, really is. There's just, there's all of these different development kits and programming languages and tools that you can use for your front end, your back end, and your database and infrastructure. Those essentially four tenants. I mean, it really is front end and then the three over here. And then you also have a breakdown of your web and your mobile developments, but you just have a lot of options. And it is, I mean, it's promising because there's so much a possibility out there, but it's overwhelming too. It's really hard to pin down what out of this list is really going to work the best for me. And then from that, these are the kinds of things that you want to consider when you're making your selection, because it's broad and it's overwhelming. So it's really important to narrow down what you're trying to do and apply that to what you're going to use. I mean, common sense, yeah, but again, when there's so much out there and you have to do so much research, especially if you're kind of new to the software game on what to use, it's really important to kind of go down this logical path where you're looking at your type of project. You're really trying to size out, what you're doing and how you're going to deploy it and what it's going to be used and accessed on. And then you want to look at your team's know-how as you grow your team and as you have your close confidants that start out with you on this journey. What are they comfortable with? What are they proficient in? And what's popular? What do people typically code in? And what do they typically use to develop something? Because it's best is important, and I'll get to this in a little bit, but popularity is also important because that helps you really widen your reach in your talent pool. And that really helps you find the most, the broadest selection of people, because, and I really think, and this is even a thing, even from a big corporate structure, we talk all the time about diversity, and not in the buzzword weird way that I'm honestly not a fan of. It's in the real way of diversity of thought, diversity of background, diversity of culture. And whenever you have a really popular language, you can really get what I believe is one of the most essential components of a company, especially a startup, to get that diversity of thought and to get that diversity of experience in your startup. Like that is really crucial to make sure that you have something that is, very accessible and very understood, and not just for your developers, but also for anybody else in that sphere that has to deal with software. And then just running down this, it's really time to market too. We all know it's about speed. We all know that you need to really strike when the iron's hot, especially at this stage of a company. And scalability too. After you strike when the iron's hot, after you get your product out there, how do you really grow? How can you grow without breaking and shattering? And then how do you maintain your scale when you get to the scale that you want, or at least this, because we always want to grow more and more, the scale you're comfortable with, that you're really making some good revenue. How do you maintain that? How do you make sure that everything is automated enough to where you don't have to hire a bunch of manpower just to manage the fact that it's at this scale, because there's so many things out there to help with automation. And then going all the way down to the bottom, availability of talent. See how it links back up to the top too. When you have that accessible programming language, and whenever you kind of, and also, in general, when you're developing a product, and it goes hand in hand with your development of your company, of how you approach talent acquisition, and how you look at different backgrounds too, and how you kind of find different people that can add to the company in different ways. And there's also 7 factors to really consider whenever you're trying to choose your tech stack. It's the cost, how can you really get skinny enough with cost to still have a quality product? It's the community around different languages. How strong is that community, especially if you're going open source, which I personally, absolutely recommend, because it's not as locked down and you have so much input from so many different smart people. And I didn't even mean to make diversity the topic of this call, but I think I'm accidentally stumbling back in there. I mean, it really is about having a good language too, like with a big community, can really help you get so much input and develop your product with other people just on forums. And that goes into development speed. Whenever you have a strong community, you can really have a fast time to market. And this is, I don't want to repeat too much. Projects, I mean, scalability as well. Project size, which can go into scalability. How big are you trying to get? Because not everyone's trying to, have a customer base of 100,000 to 1 million people. It's really about, like, especially if you're trying to develop more of a niche product, like really keeping that in mind and not oversubscribing talent, and just different software interconnections. And then your types as well, and whether you're going to deploy on web or mobile. Those are very important. And then from that, this is why I was really trying to, it was my Trojan horse to hone in on popularity so much. Oh, Gozi, yes.
I had a question when you mentioned web and mobile. Like, what if you're starting out like with a web app just because it's a lot simpler, but you expect that at some point you will have, an mobile app? Should you be thinking about your tech stack differently, since you're gonna plan to like grow into a web app, or just to a mobile app, or just focus on what the product will be at the start?
That's an excellent question, and it really depends on what your end game is. It depends on just going back really quick to your project size, your type, and your scalability. So if you were, for example, if you're thinking, I'm developing for mobile now, but I really want to go to web later. I want to go to web-based. I want this to grow out more, or I want it to reach a wider audience, or whatever the reasons are. That's where I personally believe that, you need to work hand in hand. You need to first, keep your eyes on the prize and focus on what's here and now, because development speed, get the mobile development out, get that started, and get that fleshed out, finalized, and then delivered at least to enough of an alpha or a beta level project. But if that is really your end goal in mind, it has to be some kind of concurrent workload, because if this really picks up and kicks off, because we can never really predict how much heat a project's really going to attract, and how much of a user base out of the opening of the gate. Really, that depends on marketing or just user need, really. So because you can't predict that, even if you have a mobile app that exists for a couple of years, and then you finally have the funding or the need, or the you have a good enough reasoning to go web, you still want to play it safe. If that's your end goal, you want to play it safe and also keep that, maybe develop not concurrent, but towards the tail end of the mobile life cycle, shifting some of that talent over to web development. And this is why this is why talent on developers and accessible languages are so important, because then you can have people who can almost act like full stack developers, and just to not have too much lingo thrown in there. Full stack really it is people who can work on front end, back end, infrastructure, database. Like that's your full stack. And the more the more interconnecting and the more challenging languages you have, then you really you limit who you can partition to where. And not to stick on that one, but I think that's really important to consider. But then you can reposition some of that talent onto web development at the tail end of your mobile. Now, if you're staying mobile, you want to focus on that, focus on developing that, and making that the really the quality oriented product. Because if you're thinking, I kind of want to go to web, but then you don't really, that's more of a question of project type and size to really determine what your end goal is and how you want to scale. Because you don't want to take up all of that, you don't want to take away those resources for an effort that's not really going to pan out, or it's not really, it's not actually what you want it to do, or it's not really going to give you any benefit. So don't know if that was too long-winded, but did that answer your question?
Yeah, that was perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. Love that. All right, and then just kind of moving forward through here, and like I was saying, popularity, it's crucial. And these are quality stacks too, but whenever you focus on popular, that really can be your best tech stack. That really it's kind of hard to differentiate too, because what's used more is going to be iterated upon more, and it's going to have a larger community and more just thought behind it, and more collaboration, more thought and collaboration. So right here we have Mean, which uses MongoDB, and then Express.js or Express.js, AngularJS, and Node.js. And then you have Mern, which is similar setup, and then there's React again. And then you have Flutter and LAMP and Ruby on Rails too. So these are kind of your 5 biggest stacks, and it's also really helpful for people who don't have a lot of familiarity in this space, because this is stuff that is really well documented and that people iterate upon, and that it's used in a lot of companies. Because there's no reason to reinvent the wheel when it comes to software development. It's your value add and your product, and that's what's going to differentiate you, what you're trying to develop. But how you develop it, it's all about ease of use, accessibility, and efficiency. So there should never be any shame in taking these templates. In fact, it is completely encouraged, especially in an open source environment, because you have just connected yourself to a bunch of other developers and startups and companies that can have a wealth of knowledge if they're willing to collaborate. And most people, especially in an open source community, usually are. And then just to kind of, to sort of give a little bit of a context on where those sit, Mean is really good for cloud native web apps and SPAs. Mern is good for hybrid mobile applications. Ruby on Rails is good for web apps with purchase functionalities mainly. So, that's where you want to have sort of a POS like setup. And Flutter is good for cross platforms. So that's where you have your mobile and you have your web from a single code base. So, goes back to your point. I mean, if you were really looking for that heterogeneous space of both web and mobile, Flutter would probably be a really good tech stack. And again, there's so much information out there that really helps you dive into how to get that developed. So that could be a really good thing to look into. And there's a LAMP as well, where that's scalable and customizable web applications. So that's really your robust, your beefy, your multi-use web applications. And I do actually want to go on a quick side note. You'll see Python and these are more the tech stacks. Like, this is the setup. This is the sort of documented. These are the baselines really in terms of the popular tech stacks. But Python, just to go ahead and get on my soapbox, it is fantastic. It is lightweight. It is so it's so multi-use as a programming language whenever it comes to backend development, and so easy. I mean, that is like everybody's. I feel like, at least from whenever I was in college, in the software world, that was everybody's favorite language, because it was so easy to utilize with its huge wealth of libraries. So these are great templates. These are fantastic templates, and there's no problem. Don't deviate if you feel like this perfectly fits your product. But there's no shame in mixing and matching, especially throwing Python into somewhere, or even MySQL from a database standpoint. If you feel very comfortable with that, or you like how that's used, you don't have to deviate from this path, but you're more than free to. Especially if you feel like, man, I feel like I don't have any Java specialists, or my application really, it doesn't seem friendly for this kind of deployment with Java. But Python sounds so nice. With Python, there is no prescriptive way to develop your product. And then with that, this is where I kind of I feel like I've kind of gone through a lot, high level, but still a lot. So does anyone else have any questions before I keep going? And I'll give it the beautiful 5-second, 3-second pause.
Looks like we have a question in the chat, which is,
oh, perfect.
Popular stack is best for web, hybrid, and which is best for security?
Oh yeah, perfect. So let's actually go back. Oh, I didn't actually see we had more people in here. How's it going, Sandy? Okay, let me go ahead and get back here. And also, if I mispronounced your name, I'm so sorry. Phonetics was definitely not my major, so I am the worst. But so for web hybrid, that's perfect. So that's where you can really hone into Flutter. So that's good for that cross-platform development, and that as well as MERN for hybrid mobile applications. But that's where I personally recommending Flutter just because that gives you that sort of that ease of switching from the get-go. You don't really you're not really super siloed in and like because it has a specialization between in the hybrid space of both mobile and web. And then for security, I'm going to be totally candid. That's a great question, and I'm not really sure. Uh, Now, from a security standpoint, that can really come into what your deployment status is, and then what your deployment scheme is, and how you're managing that, and what kind of services you're plugging in, and what kind of add-ons from a SaaS standpoint that you have. Nudge, nudge. Over to someone in the call who specializes in that. But that also comes down to the hardware you use too, especially if you go on premise. It really comes down to the data protection and the robust enterprise offerings that people have. And I mean, yes, this is what I will cover on that. I do want to at least now touch on that from a data protection standpoint from Dell, but that really comes down. But that's the same philosophy that a lot of hardware data protection carries, which is we're going to find a way to back up, manage your services, and have robust zero trust cyber resiliency to where you don't even have to think about a single cyber attack because of the management software that goes behind the hardware. So so does that answer enough of your question? And sorry if it didn't, because in terms of software, I'm not the most well versed in security. Oh, perfect. I saw the thumbs up. Beautiful. And then this is kind of my bleed-in slide to go from software to hardware. So you have your two deployment models, and they have and at Dell Technologies we actually have both deployment models supported. Now we're not and to be totally candid, we are not just a straight AWS Azure shop to where you come and then we do we help you set up with all of that deployment, all of that development, but we still do support those cloud. We still do support those cloud interfaces and those cloud deployment schemes, and especially with companies that already work in AWS and Azure. But that's still more do it yourself, and that's still you're at the we have products that support them, but you're still at the mercy of SaaS pricing schemes, which the subscription based year to year could be by usage too. And I mean, so there's kind of a thing on this. It's really good if you don't want to mess too much with the hardware, or you're really just trying to get something off the ground started and lift it up. Cloud is an excellent place to look. It really is lightweight, and it really does take a lot of the stress off of you. Now it can, and both can actually be expensive. I feel like that's kind of a little bit of a misconception because you think cloud, I don't have to buy any hardware, super cheap. And I mean, yeah, I mean it's easier. And if you look at man hours, and if you look at kind of a learning curve, yeah, it can be easier. But you are really at the mercy of a lot of those pricing schemes too. And however they're going to fluctuate. So that's really the trade-off. When you look at on-prem, you have to do a lot more of that training, that understanding of of hardware architecture, and of any hardware vendor services and managed software. But you don't have to constantly worry about fluctuating prices or usage. You just have to worry about the power of the server because you have it and you have it and you have it forever. And there are some hardware vendors that really pride themselves on long life cycles and agility. Hint, hint. Just shameless plug. No, but seriously, there really is there's a good argument for both, and there's a good trade-off between both. And it's really important to look at your funding and look at how you're trying to secure more funding or hold on to it, or how much time you need in development down the road. Because a lot of times, cloud's going to be the route. But there's also a lot of times where you can just buy the server and then you just have it to deploy and develop on. Yes, I see a question and I'm sorry, I know it's not really Mildred. What
Yeah.
was your name again?
John.
It was John. Yes.
Yeah, you kind of inkling on earlier about nudge, regards to helping you out a little bit. I can put in my 2 cents here. With
Mhm.
regards to which one is a hybrid solution, you can actually look at, depends on your CTO, the person that you hired for your company.
Mhm.
Whenever you have a CTO on board, they will be the one planning the layout of your technology base. So from that endpoint, from the CTO side, they'll present to you the security as well. That because being a CTO, you need to cover everything from the hardware side to the software side, to the infrastructure, to the database, everything in between, until security. So that's just my 2 cents there.
No, that's great input, honestly, because I mean, yeah, it is, and I do have the privilege of working with a lot of CTOs and CEOs from different spans of companies, and the smaller the company, the breadth of responsibility from a technical standpoint, even in a resiliency and security standpoint, is put on them. And then Gozi, I see you have a question too.
Yes. I guess I was wondering, like, if you, especially like with so many people working remotely now, like if you are doing something that is cross-border, different countries, which solution do you think is better? And I guess also I'm thinking like security reasons, like if you're having everything stored in one place. And then also there are different like laws around data in different places. So I don't know if you should be thinking about all of that as you're deciding which solution, cloud or hardware.
You absolutely should. That is a fantastic point, and that's actually something that I've been dealing with in my work life too, from a hardware standpoint. And that's something that I'm even going to highlight. Whenever you're a smaller company, and whenever you have to worry about cross-border trade and compliance and regulations, and all of those different laws that apply to different countries and regions, it's really important to have something that's lightweight, that's flexible. Now, whenever you have a larger business that you can use to sort of deploy across those borders to ship and to have different sister sites, that's where you take advantage of the on-prem solution. That's where, especially from a Dell standpoint, we help with that regulatory and compliance from a hardware perspective and help you get that stuff shipped out from our global company, especially from my side of the business. We help with a lot of that. But when you're starting out and you don't have the time or the knowledge or the legal know-how to navigate through that, that's where I'd recommend cloud. And again, and that could either be you go through your own development and then you hook up through to AWS, or you actually buy a cloud service solution to where you have someone, just the typical, hosting your data on their hardware at their facility, and then you just have everything loaded up from your end wherever you are in the world. But that's still where I'd recommend cloud without a doubt, because that's going to be the most lightweight thing that you can not have to worry about shipping products around for. Or just and also data governance in terms of those laws, and from that perspective, that's typically not that's gonna apply in every space, whether it be cloud or whether it be hardware, and that just really depends on what you're deploying on. Because if you're looking at an AWS or Azure perspective, it should be globally accessible, unless you're in certain regions that could be VPN locked. And this is where I'm getting into a space where I don't want to lead you astray and fill in some blanks, because that's to where I really understand from a cloud perspective, that lightweight usability. So I don't believe that there should be any data governance laws whenever you're using cloud or really prem, but it can absolutely vary on what you're doing, or based on what you're doing. So yeah, and then from that, I'm going to go ahead and just give us a brief overview and see where we are at time. Beautiful. And give us a brief overview of made it back. And then the origami returns of just our portfolio from a Dell Technologies standpoint. So like I said, we have a very, very wide portfolio, and that it can be confusing on us from an internal perspective, but it can be amazing for customers because we just have so many things you can use to plug into your solution. So just starting off from a client standpoint, We have just these sort of silos, and this isn't everything, but this is, a good enough coverage of how our silos work from a client perspective. So we have our Optiplex line where we have our 7000 micro, and these all come in different flavors and configurations. And when you look at all of these products from client all the way to storage, they are supposed to be fully customizable from a component perspective. So, everything around cost and everything around licensing is completely choosable, and it's completely up to the customer choice of how to configure based on the things you think are the most important. And that's not even bringing into the space where we do from my side of the house. That's just Dell, period. I do see there's a question in the chat. Oh, beautiful. Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Great, yeah, great call out, Sandy. But so that's really something to keep in mind when you're looking at all of this. And then for a micro desktop, that's really going to be your smallest form factor. That's going to be rugged, that can be deployed in any areas where you don't have the best cooling. I mean, from a client perspective, it's outfitted with fans, don't have to worry too much. But still, in hot, rugged environments to where you don't have good ambient temperatures for a normal PC, that's where you can deploy that with still a good heavy enough of compute to run software applications. Now, from a workstation perspective, those are going to be your beefier client devices that can support up to, I think, about 4 GPUs, or let's think 3 GPUs. It just depends if you're doing single wide or full height. And actually, I think this is where I'm getting into the space I always work. So I do want to take a step back. How often does everybody in the call actually even work with hardware, period? Opening up a computer or a server, and dealing with those components before I just start throwing out lingo left and right. And if honestly, and if nobody has any feedback on that too, that is a-okay. I'm just going to go ahead and still not get too lingo-y and not get too abbreviation friendly, because we do that a lot. And Esther knows better than most that we have our fair share of acronyms. So I'll still just keep that more high level. But so from a workstation perspective, those GPUs or those graphics cards that you put in there, those are good for any kind of video surveillance, AI and inferencing workloads, AI model development and training, anything that really uses accelerators instead of the CPU to do compute and to do calculations for whatever your product or software is. That's where you really want to go from a client perspective. If you're just trying to get a tower or two just to deploy somewhere to work on to develop something that's more, and this is really something that's going to be heavyweight too. This is the place where you can either do some development on or run some really heavyweight applications that are going to be graphically intensive, or even, and then we also have a rack option too, but it still falls in the precision category. And just to clarify, tower is your standard, it's your standard PC that you always see, that just I have nothing else really describe it with except for just this tall, really, that stands up. And then your rack format is what you usually put into a data center. If you've ever really seen one or worked with one, and they're full of the big metal racks where you just have servers that are slotted in one after the other in every slot for super dense compute. And even though and that's what kind of differentiates what a client system is versus what an enterprise system is. And that's actually what's kind of cool about this, just to make this distinction. You see that rack right there, but that's usually only going to be enterprise. This is our only rack offering for client. I think this and the 3960. But anyway, from there we have industrialized PCs. Those are going to be just your rugged, kind of between your micro and your workstation. Edge, our smallest form factor, that's our least powerful system, but that runs anywhere. You can just drop that anywhere, especially if you're doing anything with telecommunications. That is your go-to product, and it is a fanless design and rugged mobility. That's just if you're doing anything where you're deploying and you need to use a laptop in a super rugged, dusty, hot environment. That's your tablets and your laptops. And then I'm actually going to this. So this is the enterprise slide. This is kind of going over everything we have in our PowerEdge portfolio. So PowerEdge is the mainline name of all of the servers that we carry and we support. And I'm actually I'm gonna do a quick kind of rundown. Edge you see on the right side. those are going to be our servers, and again, just to hone in on the distinction, servers, rack, client, set on the ground, really, or just in an office or anywhere you would do some kind of development, really. But these are going to be, even though the typical setup for a server is going to be in a data center that's super cooled, that's big and built to support these kinds of workloads and this kind of density and these power requirements, these edge servers can be put anywhere. I mean, like anywhere to a certain ambient temperature rating, of course, but really anywhere. That's for throwing out wherever you want. And then going from there, this is the rest of our kind of core offering. These are built for more standard data centers. They can still be put in a lot of crazy places, but that's really going to be our edge portfolio. That's where you can put them. And this is definitely this isn't relevant to you guys and what you have to usually work with, but edges like oil rig, military deployments, desert, like that's usually what these are used for. So if you're like, I don't have a place to really work out of, or like I don't actually have a traditional data center, but you still want a server that, is going to be really resilient and not to unideal environments. That's it. And then for ideal environments, that's everything we have on the core side. And I'm not going to run through all these products. Don't worry. I'm not going to take us through. It's really more about the distinctions. But right here we have, we have 1U and 2U offerings, U's being the rack units and the rack heights, because each rack it's usually measured by a unit, and they go up to 48 to 52 units really. But a 2U or a 2 rack unit server is going to take up, 2 of those spaces. So you can either fit 48 of these 660s or 24 of the 760s, really. I mean, that's really the big distinction. And with that space comes more compute, it comes more power, it comes greater density, it comes higher CPU compute. And then with these lines right here, you see that's going to be, that's really your Intel supported with the 760. We also have AMD supported as well. When you see this 7615, the 6615, those are AMD supported. And from an AMD perspective, when it comes to developing a higher core count, higher wattage, but higher core count, and they're really friendly for CPU bound applications or products. And we have on the right side, this is for cloud service providers, and I think my slide was going, but that's for cloud service providers. If you're actually going to develop a product that is going to be a cloud server, like you're going to actually act as a cloud service provider, that's great for your side too. And then on the top left side, those are our GPU dense, really targeted towards AI workloads boxes. They're massive. They're very high performant, and it's actually what's being used today to kind of compete with things like ChatGPT. So from an AI perspective, if you're developing generative AI or looping it into your application, that's where you want to look, because when you think AI, you want to think accelerator or graphics card GPU. And then kind of to sort of cap off, I mentioned we have a cloud offering too. And this might be the most attractive to everybody on the call, really, at least from this standpoint. It's called Apex, and it is it supports AWS, Google Public Cloud, Red Hat, VMware. It's really about having it's called multi-cloud, but having a sort of one-stop shop solution to where you have your compute and you have it linked into whatever your typical cloud service provider is. But then you can still have it run on our hardware. So you can, whatever your application is deployed on, let's say that you started out deploying on the cloud and you started with AWS, but you're like, I need some more computer power. I need something with more horsepower, and I don't want to go into the server space yet. I still want to stay cloud, or at least want to stay hybrid, or I want to go to the hybrid space. Whatever your path is, that's where you would want to go to Apex, because then you can put a lot of your development schemas onto these devices that are hosted and managed by Dell, but still allow you to keep your same ecosystem. And then that's where you can either go from ground to cloud or cloud to ground, and that's where you stay hybrid too, really, to where you're trying to go from your standard development, and stay cloud, or even go half of be cloud and then have some on-prem too. And then I think slide shows enough. And then this is our most robust, beefy, and probably irrelevant for now, because these are our heaviest offerings, but this is our storage portfolio. And the reason we have so many is because they do a lot of different things. As you can see right here, it's all for so this, and this is, I think, later down the line from a startup perspective, when you really are building out your business and when you're really scaling out, this is where you want to look. And this can also be done through Apex in the cloud too. But if you're having something that deals with a lot of data, that deals with a lot of user data, you want to look into these silos and what you can really utilize and get out of these different products. And they all cover they cover and reach different use cases, and are also supported by cyber protection and resiliency. That's another line of products that I don't have on here, but those go in tandem with these hardware devices, and they back up everything, and then they reduce it down and get the the capacity used, or the storage space used, to a really small amount compared to the data that's on there. But yeah, and that's just if you're dealing with block, file, unstructured data, or a purely VM-based containerized deployment, VxRail. And that's the stuff that you look at later whenever you're really trying to find a place to put all of that data. So that was my super wordy run through of everything we offer. And now that's the end of the session from my part. So any other questions? Oh, yes. Yes, John.
Hi again. For Apex, will you be able to have a load balancing? Let's say, for example, we have our deployment in AWS, and we have another deployment in Microsoft Azure.
Mhm.
So if anything fails down in between, will that be automatically handled by Apex?
Yes. So because you would have to, with Apex, you'd have to go through two different buying cycles. You'd have to get, and this is actually kind of showing a little bit how we work internally whenever we work with customer engagements. You would get a quote for an Azure-based Apex deployment and an AWS Apex deployment, but you could still have both for your customer set and still have it all be managed and load balanced as well, because that's what we work on our end to make sure that everything is properly provisioned.
Beautiful, beautiful. Because I was kind of trying to design my own load balancer between the two services, and kind of looking for service actually that would answer my multi-cloud needs.
Yes, and that is actually exactly what Apex tries to address for people with multi-cloud deployments too, who
Excellent.
work in more than just one cloud service provider. So Such, did you have
Great.
a question too?
Yes, I did. So I wanted to ask that, okay, for so I'm currently considering, definitely AWS will be our deployment zone for the product. But if we stick to AWS, and while building the product, we are thinking, okay, finally we're going to deploy in AWS. So my current strategy is, should I use the Google Cloud and resources by Google and Azure and those things? Yes or no? I feel like AI, we have AI inbuilt in our product, and we are running some data models and things like that. So considering that, I want to use Google because that's very relevant to my AI/ML models, and that will help us to have more robust structure. But if I use them, then when I'm deploying, will there be a problem because I'm going to deploy on AWS? So how should I make decision at this point whether to go with Google Cloud for our AI/ML data models, or Azure, mostly with Google Cloud, or so how should I think about this? Or should I just skip them and just stick with the AWS and Amazon products because I'm going to deploy there? Yeah.
So that is a fantastic question. And this is where we get in a little bit of, I don't want to lead you astray at all or give any kind of half advice. So I'm only gonna I'm still gonna say it's whatever your product's biggest offering is, you want to make the switch. So if you're really trying to focus on AI and inferencing from a Google Cloud perspective, that's where you'd want to try to keep it homogeneous enough. Now, as I was talking with John, if you look at different offerings and like looking at Apex, you can really deploy on those too. But if you want to keep it, but from a startup standpoint, if you do want to keep it I feel like you want to at least keep it homogeneous. But and that's kind of the struggle too. because AI inferencing is taking such a big storm, and that's a lot of, like I've mentioned in my bio, a lot of what I've worked with, and it's transformed so many businesses where people will kind of break convention and they will take a harder path just to have some AI inferencing development go alongside their typical product development. So that's why I'm actually, that's a fantastic question. I feel like it'd be one of those things where you would want to still stick with what you know, stick with what works, because it really is important to have something consistent that is usable, that is translated across, that they can be translated to different people. Sticking with AWS, I feel like that would be honestly the best bet, unless your AI inferencing offering is going to be is really going to be the meat and potatoes of your business. And I feel like at least maybe the add-on is for now. Sticking at like really developing your product for now from an AWS perspective, and then pivoting more as you have that built up and have that to where you just have it, from an iteration perspective, then you go look and either have a managed hosted service for your AI inferencing or split the workload. And I would still think whenever you're switching to go to Google Cloud, you'd still want that to be managed and to take a lot of that weight off of your shoulders. Again, unless it is the biggest offering, then you pivot, you kind of reverse really. Going with a managed service offering from a hardware provider, at least in my perspective, and it could be biased, but from my perspective, for one of the options, I think is very important. So you can have your full manpower and development power on what is going to be your product. So does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, so also like the following question would be like, is there any intermediary way I can go with, like maybe have the benefits of Google Cloud as well as further deploy it strategically? So is there any midway to this problem?
To where, and let's see if I can scope this out more. And do you mean where you can kind of have your ease of deployment for both? Because that's where I would say,
No, not for deployment for both. Deploying will happen in AWS itself, but what I'm saying is the AI that will be running. So maybe like we can put the pieces and then probably at the initial stage of startup, to scrap it out, that take the data from Google Cloud that we want and then put it manually there on AWS as we since our product will be there deployed. So is there a midway like that we can work out?
So that, and I'm sorry to say, but that I'm not super sure of. But I just, from theorizing and from thinking, I think that that's still doable. That's the thing, because whenever you're developing these models, you have the data, you have them built. It doesn't really matter where it was created, and as long as you can give it a new home. So I do feel like what you're saying, I feel like is actually doable. But again, I don't want to lead you astray and mislead you and speak from a place where I don't have that much experience between working in those two different environments.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Of course. Got my hand raised. Oops. Right. Any more questions?
Perfect. Looks like we are right at time, a little over. Thank you, Matt, so much. This was a fantastic session. I put the link to a feedback form in the chat. Please give us any insight that you might be able to offer. Really appreciate you being here and making this so interactive. Matt, thank you. Thank you, Esther. Thank you so much for making this happen.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
We'll do more. Great.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining, everyone. Thank you for your time.
Bye, everyone.